What I believe we're told by the weatherman it'll be a balmy January day. January 2nd, supposed to get up to about 25 to 30 degrees, so looking forward to warmer temperatures. So I'd like to welcome all of you here this morning to the January 2nd, 2018 meeting of the Hutchinson City Council. Please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho. Soldner. Here. Inskeep.
Here.
Deckent.
Here.
Dave Line.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I saw Daryl Peterson. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you, Daryl?
I'm fine, and you?
Good, fine, sir.
I'd like to say a couple of things, if I may, before I start. I'm going to wish you all a blessed Christmas instead of a happy Christmas. Happy stops the minute you stub your toe, but blessed continues on. So this year will be a blessed Christmas. And the other thing, I hold you all accountable for the weather, seeing as how you micromanage everything within the city. I hold you accountable for the weather that we have today.
All right,
Okay.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Most Gracious Father, it's an honor and a privilege to come before you this morning. We thank you, Father, for the new year. We thank you, Father, for 2018. We thank you, Father, it be a blessed year, as blessed as we want it to have it be. And Father, we thank you for the inspiration, inspiration of the Holy Spirit, Father, guiding us and directing us. We thank you, Lord God, as we come together, we thank you for this city and this council. Even though things don't flow maybe like we always like it to, but Father, overall, it's better than most, and we thank you for that. We thank you, Lord God, for the decisions made today and the decisions made the rest of the year. That, Father, there'll be a blessing to the majority. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Daryl. All right, next item.
Item 4, oral communications from the audience.
All right, again, this is the time that we set aside on the agenda for people to come and make certain comments about things related to the Hutchinson community and items that are not on the agenda. So if there's anybody in the audience, please come forward. All right, seeing none, next item.
Item 5, consent agenda.
Council, I do have one item I'd like to maybe spend a few minutes on, the approval of the November 2017 financial report. Angela, could I ask you to come to the podium here? Hope I haven't caught you off guard, but I spent a little time looking at the November 2017 financial reports, and just noticed that a couple of things, that our general fund receipts are at about $31.5 million, and our general fund expenditures are about $30,387,000. So at least through the first 11 months, we've got a positive revenue stream over expenses. And then the ending cash balance of 11/30/17 is about $7.2 million. So I guess my questions would be, what would your best guesstimates be in terms of where we may end up in terms of our year-ending balances, in terms of the general fund, revenues, expenditures, and can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. In December, we typically have many expenses as people or departments are using their full budget. And in this November, we hadn't made transfers to some of the funds, like the Fund Valley, the airport, golf. So those will come out in December. So I think originally I had said maybe like $4.9 million for ending cash balance. I think it's going to be lower than that. I think I hadn't accounted for some extra expenditures that had arisen. We hadn't fully been billed for the LEC expenditures, so that was a little higher than anticipated. And there were some other expenditures I hadn't accounted for. And then I was looking at our revenues, and our gas franchise fees were lower than I had originally anticipated. They were about $88,000 lower. So I'm thinking we may end up around 4.7.
4.7, okay. Do you recall how that compares to what we had budgeted?
I do
We-
not
Okay,
have
that's-
that
I
number.
I think we were
in
right
front of
around
me.
4.6.
4.6 is what we had
Yeah.
budgeted in terms of projected. ending.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Angela had prepared some information really right on this topic
All right.
when we did our bond call for bond rating back in, October?
Early October.
Yeah,
yes.
and she had projected, or we were looking at about the 4.9, but we've talked since then, and based on what Angela's saying, we were probably more in the, closer on target with what our projection was, so.
Okay, fine. I appreciate that. All right,
Thank you.
very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the consent agenda items? If not, do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as printed.
Second.
A motion and a second. Please call roll.
Yes.
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 Yes, next item.
Item 6A, consider resolution amending refuse service charges.
Angela Richard, Director of Finance. In November, we had come to you with a resolution to adopt the rates for refuse for 18 and 19. When we did that, we had taken into account the negative CPI decrease between 14 and 15. When the CPI decreased, we did not reduce the refuse rate per the contract. The refuse rate is tied to the CPI. And since we did not do that, we had taken the net change between the decrease in the CPI and then the following year's increase in the CPI, thinking that that would not overinflate the prices since we didn't account for that negative. But then in talking with Stutzman, that isn't what we have done in the past. We met with them, we discussed it. And per the contract, we literally take just the 1.2%. The following year, we do not factor in that decrease. So I come to you to adopt the new refuse rates for 18 and 19 that do not factor in that negative CPI decrease. So we propose that you adopt this resolution and amend the prior resolution. Are there questions?
And the only question I had is that in looking beyond or previously in terms of these contracts with Stutzman, whether or not we've ever considered putting a cap on the CPI, or should there be a cap put on the CPI from a contractual standpoint?
I don't believe we have ever considered that.
Not, I mean,
Should there
it's
be,
always a part of the conversation, or can be,
Yeah.
but we have not. A lot of it probably based on historic information
Yeah.
that it doesn't ever appear to be too far out of whack.
Has that been historically, has that been a number that has been
reasonable?
4, 5, 6% CPI? No.
Probably less than that.
Probably
yeah.
much
Yeah,
less.
much less than that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the contract itself, sorry to interrupt,
Go ahead.
if I'm reading this correct, is out through 2022?
Yes.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
And actually, in the language of that contract, because we spent a little bit of time on the history of this, and we've had decreases in the CPI 2 different times over the past 10 years, probably back in 08 when things were, we all know what was going on then, and we didn't take the decrease into account. And there's specific language in there that if the city doesn't raise or lower water and sewer rates, then
Yeah.
we're not going to lower the refuse there. And we didn't in those years. And so I think this is, based on the way the contract reads, specifically in past practice, the 1.2% increase was the right increase versus the 0.4. Yeah.
Correct.
What part of the contract speaks to that? I understand the past practice.
I do not
Paul,
have
do you
that in
know,
front
or-
of me.
Well, we don't have the
John?
contract. Is the contract?
I thought the contract-
Yeah, I think it's.
We have a resolution.
You got the
I don't think
resolution.
We don't have a
Yeah.
contract,
Okay.
I don't think.
It's, we read the specifics of the contract, and I think what we're doing is correct.
And that has been the past practice. That's what we reviewed.
And I'm not arguing with that with you. I was just
Right.
kind of curious in terms of and you've read it, so I'm
to me,
comfortable with your interpretation.
Yeah.
I guess, but a follow-up to that, are we then thinking about, although it's what, 5 years, 4 years away?
I can tell you this, it's
modifying-
calendared.
What's that?
It's calendared
It's on the books.
Yeah.
Okay.
in
to look
my
at.
calendar.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
you have it down.
I've got-
Looking at
I've got it out there for the next contract for
addressing
that issue to
when
be
there are
considered.
decreases
Yeah.
and how we, okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Okay.
Right.
okay.
But I think the idea of the CPI increase was that we don't run into situations like we've ran in with our, water and sewer, where we didn't raise sewer rates for 6
5
years, and
years.
then all of a
Right, then you
sudden,
have to-
we find where we're at, and now we're raising them, 5+% for the next 4 or 5 years, and so I think that was part of the thought process here, and we've used the CPI index in a lot of agreements, as far as any increases or decreases, so.
Okay, any other questions to Angela? Do we have a motion?
I'd move to approve a resolution establishing rates, charges, and franchise fees for collection and disposal of garbage and trash by the city, all as authorized by Section 10-209 and 10-210 of the Hutch City Code, per what was just presented to us this morning, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call roll.
Soldner,
Yes,
Inskeep,
Yes.
Deckent,
Yes.
Daveline.
Yes. Next item.
Item 6B, consider resolution regarding the Convention and Visitors Bureau Advisory Board.
Paul Brown, City Attorney, you have before you a proposed resolution that changes the Convention and Visitors Bureau Advisory Board a little bit, not a great deal. The greatest change there is South Hutchinson is no longer involved. And before, there would be about three members of that board that involves South Hutchinson. They've gone their own way, so we needed to amend the resolution, and then you'll see a subsequent contract that takes that into account. Also, if you look at the resolution, some of the positions have been made permanent positions and other at-large positions, but the folks that are involved on the advisory board, there's still many of the same folks involved. So not great changes there. The primary change involves South Hutchinson, and it's an update to take care of that.
okay.
I would say that I've been very disappointed in the fact that South Hutchinson has chosen to sever their relationships with the city of Hutchinson and the CVB. Very, very disappointed. One would believe that it would be advantageous to unify our efforts in terms of the work that those folks do. So very, very disappointed. I do know that there is a new makeup of the city council at South Hutchinson, and I wonder, I don't know if anybody is here from the CVB as to whether or not they have approached the South Hutchinson folks on whether or not they would ever reconsider, or could we make that request to the CVB that at least they reach out and have a conversation with the South Hutchinson City Council as to whether or not they would want to reconsider. I don't want to delay this agreement here, but I think the question needs to be asked.
We will do so.
Okay.
I'd agree with your comments. It is disappointing. I'm curious, do we know why South Hutch chose to withdraw? Were we simply
I
just
can't
notified?
speak
and-
for South Hutchinson other than I knew they were going their own way and trying their own efforts for Convention and Visitors Bureau.
And that decision was made at the council level, or is it an executive? No. Okay.
Council level.
Was it at a council level?
Okay. All right.
Jim's nodding.
And I did not read word for word what was in the packet, so I may ask a question that, if I had, be answered. But what representation do we as City of Hutch have on this board? The permanent positions don't indicate any established representation, so do we by virtue of, I mean, we have representatives, I take it.
Well, the only really city connection would be
Jim
Jim
is on it.
Sightnader, yeah.
Jim.
Yeah. Other than that, that would be, as far as a city staff person,
Okay.
would be Jim.
Now, we have, we appoint a number of positions, I take it.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Paul, you had mentioned the removal of City of South Hutch. You mentioned positions being made permanent or standing. What other parts of the contract changed?
we'll get to the contract. We're still on the resolution at this
Yeah.
point.
We're on the resolution. Okay.
Contract comes next.
All right. Then I withdraw that, or hold that question.
Okay, all right. All right, any other questions council has on the CVB Advisory Board makeup?
If they want out, they want out, I guess, so.
Yeah, I mean, you can't
That's it.
force them to stay.
With that, I would move to approve the resolution in accordance with City Code Section 2-1401 of Article 14, Roman numerals. Convention and Visitors Bureau Advisory Board of the Code of the City of Hutchinson pertaining to the composition and terms of the members of the Convention and Visitors Bureau Advisory Board, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes, next item.
Item 7A, consider contract with the Hutchinson Reno County Chamber of Commerce.
And here's the changes on that contract. Again, it's South Hutchinson that was taken out. There's an amendment involving the atrium indicating that there's 2% allotted, and to improvements at that facility. Again, those have to be approved by the city manager. But that change had taken place but not been included in the contract. And beyond that, then it's the other composition of the Convention and Visitors Bureau that was just done in the resolution.
I do have a question regarding the atrium, that language there. As I think for the benefit of the general public, we have a 7% transient guest tax, of which 4% contractually is retained by or distributed to the Convention Visitors Bureau. 2% to the Atrium Convention Center for purposes of improvements to the convention center only, not the hotel.
Correct.
And then the third piece is 1% retained by the city, that we use this for public improvements to our attraction-related facilities. And I think we have some things on the horizon in terms of how we may be using that 1%. My question is on the 2%. I guess I'd like to have a report, perhaps to ask the city to visit with the Atrium Hotel Group. I'd like to know what those previous improvements in previous years have been, to get some idea of how that money is being used. I'd like to have some idea of what the 2018 improvements are planned by the Atrium to the Convention Center. And thirdly, I'd like to know the remaining number of years that we have on that agreement. If I can ask the staff to reach out to the Atrium folks and to provide us a report of that, just for clarification, to keep as much transparency as possible on this project, if I might make that request.
If I could add to that as well.
Sure.
A progress report on the atrium, the hotel piece itself.
Hotel piece?
Some of the concerns I've heard about folks, the convention center in and of itself is nice, it's welcoming, it's good, but nobody wants to stay at the hotel, so to speak, or at least that was the complaint at one point. I know some strides were made to certain rooms and exits and things like that to update it, but if we don't have a nice place to stay, I gotta imagine that's a hard sell sometimes on the convention side as well. That's all I would ask as well. Thank you.
All right. Council, do you have any other questions regarding this item?
Nope. You ready?
Yes, sure. Would you
Okay.
entertain a motion?
Yes, then I will move to approve the contract between the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and the Hutchinson Reno County Chamber of Commerce, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes. All right, next item.
Item 7B, consider conditional use permit for the Salt Hawk Baseball and Soccer Complex.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Jenna.
Jana McCarron, Director of Planning and Development. And the item before you this morning is actually an amendment to an existing conditional use permit for the Salt Hawk Complex. The original conditional use permit was approved in 2012. And part of those permit conditions, at least that was recorded as part of the transcript that before the public hearing at Planning Commission was that the field would not be lighted and there would be no regulation baseball play on the baseball complex. So probably about 3 or 4 months ago, the school district approached the city and said, you know, we really have a need to light those fields, and we also want to have regulation play at that location. And after conferring amongst ourselves, we said, well, then you're going to need to amend your conditional use permit that was issued in 2012. So that's kind of a little background on this. Just one thing I wanted to point out before I get into my presentation. The original application said there were 10 poles. There are actually 13 poles. So what we will be asking you for is consideration of 13 poles ranging from 70 feet to 90 feet in height, as well as regulation baseball play at that complex. The applicant is the school district, Hutchinson Public Schools, USD 308. And I'm sure you're all familiar with this facility, but just in case someone out there isn't, it's at 23rd and Severance, just right across from the RO plant. And here's an aerial photograph. You can see the baseball fields there, as well as one of the soccer fields has striping. I think the others are less formalized. The property is designated Zone PI, which is our public and institutional district. And it's also designated that way on our comprehensive plan map. And schools and associated facilities that you would consider along with the school are conditional use permits in that PI zone. Here's a historical photo of the property, and it's dated 1991. We got this from Google Earth. You can see that in 1991, the housing around the school is already there. And this was a field. Looks like they were, or I'm sorry, the housing around the field was already there. And it looks like they were probably beginning to develop it. As part of the city's zoning regulations, we have a requirement that if a light is coming from a non-residential source, basically if a light's coming from a commercial or industrial source or other type of source, that it cannot bleed over, if you will, onto adjacent residential properties by more than 0.3 foot candles. And so what you see here is the lighting plan, all of the, I think I have a closer up version. All of the pylons, proposed lighting poles are shown. So you can see these are poles. And the red line represents that 0.3 foot candle mark. And so because it does exceed that 0.3 foot candle at the property line, then it required a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. That variance was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And so that's not really part of the consideration for you all, but I just wanted to make you aware that it did receive a variance. And in case you're wondering what a foot candle is, it's the amount, if you had a candle illuminated, an actual candle, then you measure a foot out and a foot square piece of paper, and that's how much illumination would shine on that. The amount of light that would shine on that is considered a foot candle. So it's a fairly small unit of measure. I didn't ask Justin, but I imagine in here the foot candles are probably 60 or more.
16 or 60?
60.
60.
Yeah. So it's a 1 foot candle is pretty small. And then our standard is a fraction of that, 0.3. And that's just zoomed in some more. As far as the properties that were impacted by that greater than that 0.3 foot candle, there were 16 of them, 2 of them north of the field, of the baseball fields there, numbers 1 and 2, and then several on the other side of Severance Street. And I have a list of the people. I just have some photos that kind of walk you around the complex in case you haven't been out there lately. This is 25th Avenue looking east. The ball field looking towards Severance. Cleveland Street in the vicinity of the sports complex. And then there's the intersection of Cleveland and 25th. These are the homes on the west side of Cleveland, across from the complex. And these, you can see the houses in the background there north of the complex's parking lot. And then there's some offices on the north side. Here's the batting cages. And then there's a building that was constructed after the 2012 conditional use permit approval. And I should note that even though the conditional use permit was issued in 2012, they received a variance to do initial development of those fields way back in our files. I think it was in the 90s. So they have had activity on there for quite some time, but the building was not put in until 2012. When reviewing a conditional use permit, there are factors that are part of the city's regulations that have to be considered, and I have them up there for you. And then the Planning Commission considered this proposal on December 19th, I guess it would have been, the last meeting in December. And they voted to approve it by a vote of 7-1, so it was a split vote with the conditions. And I'm going to go ahead and read through the conditions that they put on the application. The first one was that it should be for installation of 13 lighting fixtures ranging from 70 to 90 feet, as well as for regulation baseball play. That all required electrical and building permits should be obtained. Lighting should be designed and installed according to the approved plans and must be shaded as required by the ordinance and the approved variance. And I didn't mention, but probably the school district will, these are LED lights. The reason for the height is to be able to better focus the light. So if you have shorter towers, the light's more diffused and it impacts more properties. Hours of operation shall be limited to no later than 10 p.m. and baseball use shall not be permitted prior to 8 a.m. That's in response to some concerns by surrounding residents that they don't want people out there batting baseballs around early in the morning. Baseball is kind of a little noisier activity than soccer as far as when you hit the ball. The permit shall expire on the 2nd of January 2019 unless a building permit's been obtained and the construction has begun. Failure to comply with the conditions may result in revocation of the permit, and then adequate trash receptacles shall be provided, and that also was in response to some of the residents complaining about the trash from the site. So that is my presentation. I know there's some residents here as well as the school district and a couple planning commissioners. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, before council, I'm going to suggest this procedurally, Jan, if I may. I'm going to ask the 308 folks to perhaps make some comments, if you would like, regarding your application request. Then also those in the audience that have some comments, we would invite those comments at that time. And then council, you can then respond or raise questions to Jana or 308 or to any public comments before we consider the action. So if that's acceptable, we'll have the folks from 308 come forth and kind of give us your insights to the project. Thank you.
Good morning. Appreciate the opportunity to
Please introduce
share with
yourself.
you. Randy Norwood. I'm Director
Randy.
of Operations for Hutchinson Public Schools. The reason that we're here today, again, is to increase our utilization of the soccer and the baseball complex for not only our youth sports at the district level, but it also impacts community level use of the facilities also. The Hutchinson Recreation Commission, which is now a part of the city, also has approached us a number of times to consider putting lighting up out there for their programs as they're expanding into youth baseball more and more. This last summer they hosted several tournaments. They'd like to use that facility in the future to host tournaments as well, both during the day and in the evening hours. And under our current guidelines, we can't play ball games out there, both the district or any outside entity. So by ask for your approval today, we'll be able to allow the Hutch Rec to use that facility more completely as well. Also, there are other clubs on the soccer side that use that facility as well. Club Missouri, local group that's been involved with youth soccer for a number of years in this community. They bring 2 tournaments to town, and if we have lighting out there both on the ball diamonds and also on the soccer complex, that increases their utilization of that facility as well. So we hope to be able to do that. Again, our original, back in 2012, our conditional use permit that was approved at that point in time didn't call for our utilization of the baseball for games and for the lighting of both those facilities. But as our programs expand and as we move towards the use of those facilities, increased use, the lighting, and the call for games at those facilities is the reason why we're here today. I'd answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Randy? Bob, do you have any comments on the technical side?
Yeah, Bob Williams, Director of Support Services for USD 308. I would just like to echo what Jana mentioned about the lighting. It's LED lighting, and it's a targeted lighting where the height of the poles is our friend, and it really helps put the light where it needs to be, and we have less spillage. And so the technology of the lighting is really improved, and that's all I've got. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that the technology has really improved the lighting.
Bob, one question. Janet, could you bring up the map showing the fields there?
Sure.
I just kind of want to get your clarification on one area related to the soccer field itself. There's more than one soccer field there, and the one you're showing is the main field. And please describe that to the west and how that would impact the folks there along Cleveland.
The soccer field west of what we call the South Baseball Field is our soccer game field. That's where our games are played, and that's the only field that's going to be lighted.
Okay, that would be the only field that would be lighted.
The other fields to the west of that soccer field are practice fields. They will not be lighted.
Okay.
Okay.
So there will be 4 pole lights surrounding that soccer game field, and then the rest of the lights are around the 2 baseball fields.
So when tournaments are played, you only use the one field, or are you relying upon daylight to
this lighting system will have the availability to light just the soccer field when we play it. We can light each one of the baseball fields separately. They don't all have to be on at once.
And I can speak to the kids, the club, the Azuri group. When they host their tournaments, they're daytime, of course, because of the current situation, and they utilize the whole complex. The baseball diamonds are even cut up into smaller fields for the little kids.
Yes, correct.
And then they use the main field that you're suggesting. Of course, the practice fields then are divided up into smaller fields as well.
Just for those tournaments.
For those tournaments.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bob. All right. Now I think we would invite those in the audience that would like to make some comments regarding this issue to please come forward and introduce yourself.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Bob Burkhart. I live at 807 Newport, so I live right behind the baseball fields. To give you an idea how far my back fence and the baseball fields is about the distance of this room right here. That's how close I am. Give you another idea what goes on. Throughout the year, I pick up maybe 50 to 75 baseballs out of my backyard, out of my swimming pool, and up against my fence. And now you want me to light it all up, and so I have nothing to do in the evening. So in other words, during the summer, starting spring, from spring to fall, I won't have it outside. I won't be able to use my pool, the noise we're going to have, everything else going on. It's going to be terrible. 4 things that were said when this was built that was never going to take place. 1, there was to be no lighting. 2, there was to be no dugouts. 3, no bleachers. And 4, no bathrooms. And you're going to have every one of those. And I'm just wondering where this is going to stop. I mean, when we moved there, we had a nice milo field out behind your house. And we keep doing stuff, and the only reason this thing got approved to start with was because you guys said, USD 308 said there was never none of this was going to happen. And now things have changed a little bit, and so now we got to start using it. What am I supposed to do? Put yourself in my house and see how you would like it. This isn't right. You can't be doing this kind of thing. You can't change the rules and expect people to be happy about it. I mean, there's too many other things going on. It would be different if there was a buffer zone there between my fence and the field right there. There's a drainage ditch. That's it. There is no buffer zone. When we have these soccer tournaments, you can't even park in front of our house. People get out, walk across their yards, everything else. I mean, it's like we're tied in. And they're here again, parking is going to be another problem because when they've had some of these soccer tournaments going on, the streets are full again. That facility is not made to be used that way. It was made to be practice fields. I understand where 308 is coming from, but you need to look at the residents over there too. If you lived in, if I'm selling my house, would you even be interested in it? To have your house sitting on a baseball field that lights up at night? I mean, this is just common sense, people. You can't be doing that to us. I mean, we've tried to be really good neighbors. And yet, this is what we're going to get treated? I don't think it's right. I think, you know, they were practice fields, that's the way it was set up, and that's the way it should remain. I don't mean to come up here and show bad stuff out there, but the only reason we got us this far was because you said you would never do any of that stuff. And now here we are, never wanting to do every bit of it. You know, first of all, there's no dugouts on the baseball complex, so you know they got to come in. There's no bleachers there, so you know you got to bring them in. And you're going to run, you're after that bathroom, you're going to run people 2 or 3 blocks away to get to the bathroom. So everything the way this thing was set up, all of a sudden means nothing, because we need the fields. And I understand that to a certain point, but the residents, we need our space too. And I don't mean to be the one to come up here and throw rocks on everything, but put yourself in our shoes. Live where we're living. Like I say, about the length of this room is how far I am from the baseball field right now. And now you want to light it up. I just don't think it's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burkhart.
Thank you, Bob.
All right. All right. Anyone else in the audience?
I'm Mary Adcock. I live at 804 Newport. When I spoke to the Board of Zoning Appeals about this variance, I noted that the addition of nighttime lighting beyond the 0.3-foot candles would not only create light encroachment on nearby homes, but also result in added noise until past 10 p.m., traffic till late at night, and perhaps even lowered property values throughout the neighborhoods. I was told then at the Zoning Commission that I should only speak in terms of the effects of foot candles, and I will do that this morning. But I felt then, and I continue to believe, that it is extremely short-sighted to focus only on the number 0.3. It's short-sighted not to consider all of the things that will occur as a result of adding nighttime lighting to the sports field, because there's no denying that adding lighting creates more problems than just light encroachment. I also believe that the findings of fact urge all to look beyond numbers and to add any adverse effects that will occur as a result of bending the regulation. Now, since the zoning board depended on an analysis of findings of fact, and that's all I had to go on, your agenda packet wasn't online this morning, I prepared my remarks and I will focus the remainder of my comments on those findings. But most of the issues that were flashed on the screen today will be considered by the council are addressed within those findings. So, and it was my understanding on those findings of fact that all 5 had to be considered met in order for a zoning commission person to vote yes for this variance. The staff analysis for finding number 1 referred to other PI lands that have lights. However, none of the properties mentioned are as close to neighborhoods and businesses as the soccer and baseball complex. The closest to residents would be the tennis courts at the fairgrounds, which has a much fewer lights than 13 poles. In their analysis, staff also noted that the illumination of the ball fields was a property owner choice. That's true, but lighting that exceeds the zoning regulation is not a property owner choice, and that's part of why we're here today. It's also noted by staff that this property is unique because the surrounding housing was built prior to the installation of the sporting fields. It's true, that's true. Some residents can tell you the area was a wheat field when they moved in. It has been developed and added to over the years. In fact, in 2012, when plans were being made to replace an existing storage building with a new structure and some other items, the owners around this property each received correspondence from the school district signed by the superintendent at the time, and that's part of that correspondence said, quote, "The plans do not include any field lighting. It will remain strictly a daytime practice and competition facility for our students and groups that rent it from us," unquote. The superintendent's letter also noted that as a plus, the new structure would be, quote, "closer in character to a residential neighborhood," unquote. So now, just 5 years later, just 5 years, the district is attempting to break that promise and install nighttime lighting that even exceeds current zoning regulations. That is most assuredly not closer in character to a residential neighborhood. Some might say that's progress. The kids need a place to play. But many nearby residents would ask, so are we not to believe the word of a school superintendent? If we can't believe the superintendent, where does it stop? Is the next step a variance to erect bleachers for spectators at the site? True, these are conditions that are unique to this property, but they are also choices being made by the district. They are changes being created by the owner of the property. They're not something beyond the control of the owner. Finding number 2 says granting of the variance must not adversely affect the right of adjacent property owners. Staff's analysis here is all about those numbers. It says since only 16 homes experience greater than 0.3-foot candle exposure, this is an allowable number for a MET finding. So if 16 homes is allowable, I'm left to wonder what is the magic number of homeowners that need to be disturbed in order to say this finding is not met. And looking at the staff's narrative, I see that 50% of those affected homes will experience greater than the 0.3-foot candle exposure at the structure. So I'm guessing 50% is not a magic percentage either. Yet in researching lighting regulations in other communities, I see that city after city use the standard of not ever allowing any overspill of more than 0.3-foot candle onto property lines. Some less than 0.3, but never higher. I also see that the OAAA recommends not to exceed 0.3-foot candles for digital billboards. Now that's not the same as sports lighting, true, but if we're only talking numbers here, their magic number not to cross is 0.3. So I'm left to wonder why the Hutchinson Zoning Board voted yes to going against what seems to be current practices in community after community across the country. Lastly, on finding number 2, and this may seem a bit off topic at first, so please bear with me. And I admit I'm new to trying to comprehend all these agendas and statements and regulations. So as I did, I came upon a question about the height of the lighting being planned. As was mentioned, there's a plan for a total of 13 poles, 6 of those to be 90-foot high, 4 80-foot, and the rest 70-foot. My question here is in relation to zoning regulation, Article 3, Section 27315B, and if it applies to the district's overall request. Sports lighting is not listed as an exempted category in 27315A. And so in 27315B, it speaks of a height, quote, not exceeding 75 foot, unquote. So will another variance be needed for 80-foot and 90-foot poles with fixtures? Now, I understand that I thought that the variance request before you deals only with lighting illumination. So height does not speak directly to the vote before you today. Perhaps it does, now that I've heard her presentation. But I put this comment here, for one, to get it on the record, but also because if the height is a factor, that still needs to be addressed. And it speaks to the idea that this entire proposal needs another deeper look. It's not just those other factors of noise, traffic, and value that haven't been fully considered. It's also some of the numbers. Finding number 3 speaks of unnecessary hardship on the property owner if the variance is not granted. Now here staff analysis says that the lighting plan could be redesigned to fall within zoning regulations. So why doesn't the district just do that? I understand that there are most likely regulations for a lighted baseball field that must be met, but staff seem to suggest that there are ways to do that without breaking the zoning regulation. Now I don't know exactly. I'm not a lighting expert, but I do have a theatrical lighting expert that lives with me. But perhaps things like glare louvers, adjusting light angles, or heights of poles. Or why doesn't the district honor its promise to maintain these ball fields as practice facilities and continue to play games at Rice Park and Hobart Deader as they do now? Either way, it seems the property owner has other options beyond the variance. The finding also says the variance must address an unusual hardship. At the December hearing, the applicant said they needed the lighting in order to start games later. They suggested 5 p.m. I checked the 2018 baseball schedule, and unless I'm reading it wrong, all the games on the JV and varsity schedule, home and away, start at 4 p.m. So a starting time later than 4 p.m. does not seem to be unusual. In fact, a current start time of 4 p.m. is the norm. All of the other schools, for all the other schools Hutchinson plays, as well as other school districts around the area that I checked, including Buhler and Nickerson. Finding 4 says granting the variance must not adversely affect the public health, safety, convenience, prosperity, etc. Now, staff found nothing in this area, but as I stated at the beginning, it's short-sighted to only look at this application as a matter of numbers. The addition of nighttime lighting will assuredly create other factors that will impact adversely the safety, convenience, and prosperity of neighboring homeowners. Approval of the variance means that the city, in part, is helping to create these factors. Factors such as added noise to the area throughout the nighttime hours. Additional nighttime traffic, which will create greater risk for accidents in this area. An area that, due to the traffic flow during daytime practices, is already what I call a fatality waiting to happen. Add darkness, and you've got an even greater safety hazard. Prosperity. Well, the addition of nighttime sporting events in other neighborhoods around the country has been proven to reduce property values, particularly when properties are impacted by lighting at their structure, as some will be if the variance is allowed. And convenience. Well, who wants to see their living room or family room lit up by the glow of stadium lights on a nice summer night? Who wants to deal with the noise and traffic of spectators and students, very few from the neighborhood, being let out pretty much all at once, jumping in their cars to leave the area, and all trying to turn onto 23rd Street or take Acres to 30th Street at 10 p.m. 3 or 4 nights a week. All these factors, which are natural outgrowths of lighting, will adversely impact homeowners and greatly impact the character of this neighborhood. A neighborhood that I will again mention was assured by the district only 5 years ago that this would not happen. Finding number 5 says granting of the variance must not be contrary to the general spirit of the zoning regulations. Staff quotes the zoning regulation, and I will quote a couple others. According to Article 1, Section 27102E and H of the zoning regulations, regulations need to provide for, quote, compatible land use patterns, unquote, and, quote, protect property values, unquote. So can the City Council completely assure that granting this variance will not adversely affect the property value of even one homeowner? Can the City Council assure that the added nighttime noise, light, and traffic that comes in part with granting this variance will be compatible with a quiet city neighborhood and not adversely change the character of this neighborhood? In other words, acknowledging the rights of homeowners is also consistent with the spirit of zoning regulations. Some might say, well, the district can put in lights either way, so only the numbers matter and the other factors don't. And since the district can put in lights either way, well, let's just go ahead and let them put in the stronger lighting. But can a vote really be based on the assumption that the district will put in lighting anyway? Isn't the question here solely on whether the city will allow the district to bend a zoning regulation in order to install lighting that will encroach on nearby residential properties? Well, that was the question before the zoning board, but it's part of your question too. And doesn't agreeing to stronger lighting at night also make the city in part accountable for the added factors that nighttime lighting will create? In considering the findings of fact, staff ultimately said they felt all had been met. In my opinion, and as I believe as my comments here have shown, not all findings have been met. In fact, most have not been met. Now, I understand how important sports are to some children and teens. Our neighborhood already hosts plenty of children, teens, and adults nearly every day on these fields, March through October. So it's not that we're against sports. All we're asking is that the city council does not agree to bend zoning regulations or to approve this continual use permit in order to let the light shine into our yards, bedrooms, and family rooms. That the city council does not agree to this conditional use permit in order to be complicit with changing the character of our neighborhood in the nighttime. The district says that it won't be that many nights each year, but the district also said they wanted the parking lot and facility to remain open to the public at any hour of the day. So there's no, except for the playing baseball. So there's really no way to just say how many nights the neighborhood will be impacted by this change. Thank you for listening. I hope that you take into consideration these factors brought forward by the homeowners in the neighborhood. And I urge you to vote to deny the zoning board's recommendation on this matter.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. All right, anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to this subject? All right, seeing no other comments, Jana, do you have any concluding remarks before
I just had a
council has questions?
clarification for you.
Pardon me?
I had a clarification
Okay.
for you. What you're considering this morning is not the variance.
Right.
The Board of Zoning Appeals is the final body, approving body for variances. So to appeal a variance, would have to go to court. But what you are considering this morning is a conditional use permit. And among the things that are part of that permit is the lighting. In fact, if they had not come and asked to put the lighting in or have the regulation baseball play, we wouldn't be here this morning. Because they could continue to use it as they are now. That's been approved. So there are different findings of fact for a conditional use permit than there are for a variance. And those are the factors that were shown to you. The Board of Zoning Appeals did approve the variance. It was a split vote. And as far as the height requirement, we considered those as normal appurtenances to a baseball field. They're not specifically listed in our zoning regulations. So that was not something that the board considered as far as did they need a variance from the height. Let me just wanted to pull up the factors for you here, and I apologize, I'm scrolling through. So these are the factors: the character of the neighborhood, zoning and uses of nearby properties, suitability, detrimental effects. And as I mentioned, when the Planning Commission was reviewing the case, there were a number of residents that came and spoke, and they modified some recommended conditions by staff, as well as added a couple of conditions to the approval. And that's really all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
All right.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, John.
All right. Let me begin. I put together a few talking points that I'd like to share just as an individual elected official. And then I'm sure council will have other comments here. I've reviewed this very thoroughly and take certainly the considerations of the neighborhood very, very serious, and the total community at large at a serious level. As I reviewed the proceedings, the Planning Commission did approve the conditional use permit on a 7-to-1 vote. And 7 of the 8 factors considered by the Planning Commission in their judgment have been met. The one factor that partially was met and partially was not met was the effects to the nearby properties, and I certainly appreciate the comments of the neighborhood. I focused of the factors, the 8 factors, the area, what I view as the character of the neighborhood, and I'll recite this as the Planning Commission considered it. Areas are surrounded by residential neighborhood and currently used by USD 308, HCC, Hutchinson Rec, and Club Missouri for youth soccer and baseball practice. There are several soccer and baseball fields in the area. So that was the consideration I have somewhat focused on in terms of my position on this particular request. As I look at the whole city of Hutchinson and 308 school district, I think we would all agree and understand that it is a very, very compact district. We simply have no ability, the school district has no ability whatsoever to expand beyond its current boundaries. We don't have the luxury of looking at a cornfield piece of property and building all these wonderful facilities. We just simply, as a community, we've inherited this from years past in terms of the decisions of the school district boundary, and so we're basically landlocked. And so it makes a tremendous challenge to the 308 school district in terms of trying to retrofit these facilities into residential neighborhoods, and it is directly impacting the folks that we've heard from this morning. So, you know, I've concluded that neighborhood schools, playgrounds, practice fields have become an integral part, and these neighborhoods have inherited these facilities because that's the hand that has been dealt to the community based on the boundaries that were set years and years ago. In my judgment, I think the proposed lights are long overdue. I'm going to speak a little bit to the soccer field issue. On a personal level, as a grandfather of 3 Hutch High graduate boys, all who went through the Hutchinson High School soccer program over about a 9 to a 12-year period, my wife and I traveled all over South Central Kansas, as well as Hutchinson, in terms of watching our grandsons. And I can tell you for a fact that that our soccer fields in Hutch competes against the Ark Valley League schools, who, by and large, I think the majority, or if not all of them, have lighted fields, turf fields that they typically will use on football and soccer field complexes. We do not have that here. And I don't want to revisit the Gowan Stadium issue, but that's the fact of life in terms of that's the best facilities we've got. I think the soccer fields are adequate, but they're not elaborate at all. And we're competing against 6A schools that we just have, in my judgment, just average fields. In recent years, and Randy mentioned this, there have been facilities that have been improved. There are new dressing rooms. I can tell you, my grandsons and a lot of the other young men and women used to have to change in the dressing room, or in their vehicles. That we simply did not have dressing rooms for these young athletes. And we deserve better, I believe, as a district, and the district addressed that problem. There is a new permanent scoreboard that prior to that it was very inadequate in terms of our scoreboards. And thirdly, the north parking lot has now been paved, so we've dealt with some of the dirt and the dust and so on, so it's been a tremendous improvement. So in my judgment, I think the next logical improvement to that complex is the lighting of the fields there. There are conditions to the conditional lighting provision, and I think 308 typically always has viewed themselves as being good neighbors and will want to continue to be good neighbors in every respect. And so with that, my position obviously would be to support the recommendations of the Planning Commission. So with that, I would open it up for other comments by other councilmen.
Okay, I do have a question from for Jana. Can the lighting be redesigned to fall within the 3 candle, the 0.3 foot candle?
I'll have to turn that over to the applicant. But
okay, Bob, I
don't
know
think
you
they can
have
light
an
all the
electrical
fields.
background, so.
There's certain requirements that go along with lighting a sports complex,
Okay.
and so
Okay, and the requirements are are whose requirements?
it's a athletic
Okay,
association
okay.
has got certain requirements from a safety standpoint.
Okay.
That there's just got to be so much lighting on the field.
Okay.
And so that's what our design has been based off of through our lighting contractor.
Okay, so they can't be manipulated to provide the lighting on the field that you need and yet deal with the residential issue.
Correct. Not that I know of.
Okay.
The targeted lighting is by far the best that technology has now.
Yeah, well, I know that it's been improved greatly.
Nancy,
Yeah.
if we adjust the lighting so that the foot candles is diminished at the residential level, then we run the risk of injury for our athletes because it falls below what the standard would be for normal lighting for soccer and baseball fields. So we assume some great risk if we go to that level.
Okay. Next question then. Would a row of trees, and this is to Jana, would a row of trees be an adequate buffer for Mr. Burkhart's concerns?
When they're mature.
Yeah, I know.
think
I mean,
so.
I have a whole bunch of cedar trees in the
Yeah.
pasture I'll bring in. No.
Yeah, and that was
Yeah.
something that the planning commission also considered, should we require a fence or a wall or something? And I think ultimately they thought, well, yeah, that would be a great idea, but especially the trees would be better
Yeah.
because they would grow taller, but,
Yeah.
it's a matter of time
Okay.
or those would serve their purpose.
Okay. Thank you.
There was mention of a 7-to-1 vote. Was that for the original conditional use permit back in?
No, that was for
No.
this one. So,
Okay.
one of our commissioners was absent, and then, Commissioner Roberts-Ropp voted against it,
Okay.
and then the rest of the commission voted for it. The, variance was split, I believe, 5-3.
The variance, okay.
Jana,
Oh, sorry. I was going, one
Go
more, if
ahead.
you don't mind. Historically, and I'm not sure who was around and who wasn't, but going back to the original conditional use permit, number 12 CUP 06, when was that? Was that in 12?
In 2012.
Okay.
But, and I mentioned this to the.
Wasn't it 2006?
I was going to say, I thought it was further back than that. The building was 12. or-
Well, the way our numbers worked, that 12 was the year, so, and
But
it was the
what-
sixth permit of the year.
The 12 was when, just to build the building.
To
The
build the
fields,
building.
the fields were
Yeah.
there in
Right.
206 or whatever.
I
But
was
be-
a part of that conditional use permit.
I see.
Randy Norwood and I both were.
Okay.
And the conditional use permit was for tearing down the old barn. It was
Right.
kind of like a hay barn.
I remember it. Yep, yep.
And built the new facility, which includes locker rooms, restrooms, public restrooms, concession area. And it also allowed us to put up a permanent scoreboard
Right.
and some concrete sidewalks and connections, and then concrete under the bleachers for the soccer fields and those kinds of things.
When it transitioned from being a Milo or wheat field to a sports complex, were there any conditional uses put on it at that time?
That was before me, actually.
Okay.
I started in ~93.
I see.
And I do remember when it was a Milo field.
I kind of
And,
vaguely, yeah.
So there was a special use permit that they went through at that time.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if they had a conditional use permit, but it was a special use permit, and which allowed us to put fencing up and establish that facility as an athletic facility.
Okay.
And so we put in sprinkling systems for the athletic fields and the fencing. We left the barn there.
Right.
We put in a parking lot, and we started making improvements to that facility. We planted the grass and let it grow for like 4 years before we ever played on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why we wasn't allowed to play baseball games.
Mm-hmm.
But
Too,
we've
'cause
always
they
been
never
able
end.
to play soccer games
Right.
there. So, you know, that was, like I say, that was before me. But I was working for the district like in '94 when we started to turn the facility or the Milo field into a athletic facility.
Okay. And the reason I was asking those questions for my own benefit, I was trying to clarify if, how do I want to word that? If the premise for the facility even being built was allowed on the notion that there would never be lighting, that maybe there would never be baseball played, you know, if that was part of the condition of it becoming a facility, and then are we going back on that 5 years, 10 years, 6 years later, or whatever?
All I can say about that is I have never read the special use permit back in '93, '94, maybe '97, when we started to turn the facility into an athletic facility. There was no lighting permitted.
Right.
When we went for the conditional use permit to build the building.
Correct.
In 2012.
In 12.
We were not allowed to do lights.
Right.
And, right, we didn't
Sure.
ask, correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so now we're at the point that we want to keep improving the facility.
I got you. Yeah.
There have been several times that we've visited with the city and come back to amend the original special use permit or conditional use permit as they're called now. We currently do have permission based on our prior to the 2012 conditional permit. We could add dugouts and things of that nature to the facility now.
Okay.
But the reason we haven't done that is because we can't play baseball games out there without lighting. We can't start a baseball game at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the early spring and get one game in. So we haven't gone to that level to improve the facility to add dugouts without the lighting aspect of it as well. So the lighting and the dugouts, which we're currently allowed to do, they go hand in hand in order for us to use the facility to its fullest level. So there have been a number of times where we as a district have come back to the city to amend the special use permit or the conditional use permit based on our needs and our future needs as well, and the full utilization of the facility.
And again, just for clarification, the baseball usage is limited to just practice as it stands right now?
We can play a baseball
Games?
game out there in an emergency level. I think we're allowed 2 to 3 dates.
I got you. Okay.
You know, if we'd have a rain out somewhere and we needed to get a game in and there was a scheduling difficulty either at Rice Park or Hobart Detter, we have permission to be able to play 2 or 3 dates out there under the current.
Under the current.
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay.
I just want to mention some of the confusion. We haven't been as good in the past of spelling out the conditions of approval.
Okay.
So, for instance, that no lighting, if you look at the last special use or conditional use permit, it didn't say no lighting. It said lighting shall not exceed 0.3 foot candles as a condition of approval. Well, the district had put on the record they weren't going to light it, and that really should have been one of the conditions of approval. Because they had mentioned it at the meeting, staff felt like, you know, we think you gave an indication to the public that you weren't going to light it, and we think it needs to be amended. But our conditions of approval have not been as clean as what I would like for them to be, quite frankly. So we're kind of
Yeah, because
trying to fix that.
I'm sitting here thinking I was on planning when this came up. And I recall at that point in time, it was, we're not going to light it.
Yes.
And so I, have struggled with this one.
Yeah.
Jana, it mystifies me that why do regulation baseball games require council approval or special use permit or conditional use permit?
You know, I think
it
that was
just-
another thing that was in the record. It was not a condition of approval.
I mean, is that something by virtue of use of the land as it's now used that you
My
can-
guess is they were concerned that there'd be more people there,
Okay.
and once you start adding spectators and the bathrooms and the dugout, some of the other things that you've heard the
Okay.
neighbors talk about.
So it's not so much the regulation game, but what it takes to support a regulation
Right.
game?
Right.
Okay.
Create the facility.
Kind of related, and Randy referenced dugouts, and I'm not hearing you disagree. I assume they can put dugouts in if they wish. What about bleachers?
That would be a normal, accessory use to
Okay.
a regulation baseball game. So
Okay.
I don't think you have to spell it out, but if you are planning to approve this, I would recommend you spell it out so that we don't give any kind of indication to the neighbors that that's
Well-
not going to be there.
Okay, I guess
Yeah.
I'm asking about currently, for a practice field, can dugouts and bleachers be put in?
They
It's-
have some bleachers there
yeah.
that are portable.
Mhm.
So I take it the answer to the question is yes.
More than yes. I
Okay.
mean, they probably wouldn't even come in and ask us. I
Okay.
wouldn't say that they would need to. That's normal, something you would normally see with a baseball field.
And the same thing, and I know we're going over it ad nauseum, but the same thing with the lighting. They have the right to put in lighting as long as it doesn't exceed the 0.3 foot candles. And again, it may not be adequate to their,
Well, Except for that, they put on the public record
uh-huh.
that they weren't
Forgive
going
me,
to.
yeah, okay.
In a
right.
public hearing.
Gotcha.
And so that's why staff was like, there was never any indication to the neighbors that those would be lighted.
Mhm.
But to answer your question, if they were building a new complex somewhere else and no one specified, yes, we would say, yeah, you can light it. Here's
Yeah.
our standard, 0.3.
Uh-huh. As long as it met the standard, then
Right.
it's acceptable because it's
Right.
part of
This one's a little different because the houses were there first.
Sure.
And it's developed over time. And we've had numerous councils and planning directors and staff, and even our regulations have changed over time. But just try to be consistent in terms of what the neighbors are expecting, and they were not expecting lights.
Nope.
Jenna, and I think I've got the right analysis of standard factors for approval, character of the neighborhood. There's a comment that says there are several soccer and baseball fields in this area which are located both north and south of East 23rd. Do you know where those fields are that you're referring to, or that was referred to in that comment?
Yeah, let me see if I can.
And at the same time, are any of those fields lit?
No, I don't think any of those fields are lit.
South of 23rd, there are on the fairgrounds property.
On the fairground?
The baseball.
course. I can picture them now.
Those
It
are,
took me a second
those
to
are
get.
lit.
And those are, okay, on the fairgrounds
On
property?
the fairgrounds property.
Okay.
South of 23rd. Yes, those are lit, right.
So there's these fields, and I don't have a map showing the
Yeah, it
ones on
doesn't
the
go that
fairgrounds.
But
Quite
further
that far.
south of that
South, right.
point, okay. And there's some fields north of there as well, from the comment that was made?
I'm not familiar with all the fields in this area, so I'd ask the school district to help me with that.
The fairgrounds ball fields, they're on the south side of 23rd Street from the RO plant to Plum Street.
To
Those
Plum.
are lit. And across the street north of 23rd Street, there's residential housing.
So not for sure. Oh, Justin can help us out on that one?
He knows
Good
his
morning,
parks.
Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. Just to clarify, at Fairgrounds, the only thing that is lit at Fairgrounds is the tennis courts.
Is it tennis
There are
courts?
3
Oh.
they're practice
I get
baseball
you.
fields, they are not lit, but
Okay.
the tennis courts are
The
lit.
tennis courts, okay.
There may be, and I was just looking at the aerial photograph, there may be some lighting. There's a throwing pit that the college uses for track and field for the field events. I'm looking, I don't think that is lit, but I know the baseball practice fields are not. But the tennis courts, the 8 complex tennis courts are lit.
Okay. Do you know of any north of this area?
North?
Ball fields that exist, and if so, if they're lit?
Not in that
Can't
immediate
even
area.
think of
No.
anything.
There's nothing that's lit.
I'm not familiar with it enough at all to.
Picture it.
Can't picture it.
Okay.
As far as city-owned facilities, things that are going to be lit are going to be like everything that's in Cary Park.
Cary Park.
Okay.
All those fields are lit except Centennial, Fun Valley, Hobart Jetter. For the most part, everything else is going to be unlit.
Rice
Rice
Park is
Park,
lit.
Rice Park and the
The
college
three-
tennis-
the 3 at Rice
college
Park
tennis
are
courts?
lit. What's
The
that?
college tennis courts? Are they lit?
I'm not sure. The
Yeah, I
ones that
think
are on
they are.
campus, I would
they
think
are.
so.
I
I'm
think
not sure off
they-
the top of my
right.
head.
Thanks, Justin.
Any other questions for?
Oh, probably, but not yet, not right now.
We'll wait until you get seated.
All right, questions?
Yes.
Sure.
Several more.
Sure.
Jenna, on item 4 of the factors for approval, extent of detrimental effects to nearby properties if the application were approved. Well, the note I made for myself, and I can't find the wording that prompted that note for me, but how are the hours changed from the initial proposal to whatever, and how does that mitigate? Here it is. Yeah. In addition, the applicant has agreed to mitigation measures (parentheses) in terms of hours of operation (close parentheses) that will reduce impacts.
Sure.
So, what are the hours changed? But then, how does that change mitigate the impacts?
Sure. So originally, the applicant just submitted the application with no limits on the number of hours or times that the lights could be on. So theoretically, you could have the lights on all night. But staff discussed with the applicant, would you be willing, because we're going to recommend it, that you limit those to a certain time of day. And the Planning Commission limited those even to no later than 10 p.m., 7 days a week. Now, the lights will not be on every night. They'll only be on when there's a game. So it's not like a sign, for instance. The sign, we have regulations about those, but those digital signs are usually on all night. So this would only be on when there is a game at the field. So that's how staff felt, and the Planning Commission agreed that those impacts were mitigated. Also, spreading the timing of the games, without having to try and get everything crammed in, before it gets dark, spreading them out would reduce the traffic. Was another consideration that the Planning Commission felt would occur with the addition of lights.
Okay, thank you. Randy or Bob, probably Randy. How about the idea of 9 p.m. weekday and 10 p.m. weekend? I think weekday would be Sunday through Thursday, and weekend would be Friday, Saturday. Lights out time. Just, I'm curious your response or the reaction to that.
9 p.m.
Because I think it's 10 right now.
It's 10 right now.
Right now.
9 p.m. would be difficult to get. We're talking about playing basically JV games out there because we're going to continue to play. We're going to continue to play our varsity games at Hobart Debtor. It's one of the finest facilities like it, obviously in the state of Kansas, and we enjoy playing there, and it works well for us in the college as well. We're talking about JV baseball games. Typically, they play 7-inning baseball games, or in our case, we play till dark. When it gets dark, we call the game, and they rarely get. They're lucky to get the 7-inning game in, plus maybe 1 or 2 more innings. So our hope is to be able to get 2 7-inning games in during that period of time. If we back it up to 9, we won't get 2 7-inning games in for those younger players. Varsity plays 9-inning games, JV plays 7, and in order to develop and have those kids have an opportunity to play, those 7-inning games are important to the program. So to back it up to 9 o'clock, could we do that? Certainly. But do we gain any kind of an advantage during the week for our kids to be able to play and to improve their skills? Not much. If you go back to 9 o'clock, and so we've had a discussion, both Kevin Armstrong and myself and Bob, about the 10 o'clock curfew, how we would manage that from a game management side, and we would just have an understanding that the coaches or the administrator in charge, we probably wouldn't start an inning after 9:40. So if we get up to 9:45 and we're getting ready to start a new inning, we're going to call the game at that point in time because we don't want to start a new inning and go into 10:15, 10:20, 10:30 if you happen to have a long inning, and then our neighbors are upset because it's 10:30 and the lights are still on. So we would have an understanding with our team and also with our opponents that after 9:40 we would not start a new inning, just to kind of keep close to that curfew as possible.
And how many games are scheduled?
Typically, JV is going to play no more than 5 home games.
Okay.
5 home dates.
Has Rice Park ever been utilized?
We utilize Rice Park right now.
Okay. And it's lit, of course.
And it's
we talked
lit,
about,
and it's
yeah.
in a neighborhood area as well,
Yeah.
of course, you know, across Hendricks and things of that nature.
Is there
And,
problems with that facility necessarily? I mean,
It's
the
not
parking
our
lot's the
facility.
best.
We have to move
Okay.
everything to that facility when we're gonna play a game, so they've gotta load everything up,
Load everything
take
up.
it with them. It's like an away game. It's not our facility. We don't practice there ever at all.
Uh-huh.
So it's like every time our JV plays, it's an away game.
Gotcha.
Because we're not on that facility. It's utilized by the Hutch Rec as well.
Uh-huh.
And maintained by the Hutch Rec and the city staff.
Gotcha.
So
How long has USD owned that property?
the complex,
The complex, where that property is situated?
back in probably the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, easily.
As was stated, it was a Milo /
Mhm.
Winfield.
Right.
Mhm.
That's where that barn.
Okay, so you're talking 5 home games in the evening. What about soccer? Do you play soccer at
Soccer
night?
plays at home as well.
In the evening?
And they're gonna, yes, they start their games typically right now at 4 o'clock.
And how many of
We will
those
move
do
to
we
5
have?
o'clock if we have lights, and we're talking about 5 to 6 contests regular season. If we're fortunate enough to play in the postseason and host anything in the postseason, could be an additional 1 or 2 contests.
Okay. So we're talking under 15.
For USD 308, that's correct.
Okay.
Now, the college does use the soccer game field and also a practice field, and they're gonna host games out there as well. And some of their games are played in the afternoon on a Saturday, for example.
Okay.
But if they had evening games, I would anticipate probably no more than 7 or 8 evening games on their part. They only play a varsity contest, not a JV. So if they start at 5, I would
They're
suspect
done
they're
by
gonna be done by
7:30.
7:30.
Yeah.
Okay,
They might have the lights on for about an hour, late fall.
okay.
I do want to make some comments.
Sure.
Mary, you do a good job eloquently expressing your position. I don't have my comments written down. And I agree with some of them in terms of support of sports and our youth and development and being landlocked in USD 308. A couple weeks ago, I opposed the lighting of the Don Michael Field, and we didn't hear from neighbors, and I expressed some of the same things that I heard expressed this morning by Mrs. Adcock. For me, it's not an easy choice, and yet it's where I'm at, that I do feel that this one certainly and strongly, as Ms. Adcock I thought expressed well, does have impacts, and it's not just a matter of the lighting. It happens to be the lighting that that becomes the a part of the conditional use permit, but the impact of noise, of traffic in the neighborhood that preceded the existence of this complex. I'd wish that it were blocks away, or in a more rural setting where there isn't the residents and the structures that exist, because it would be great to have this. I agree. I've been to fields, whether other towns or whatnot, where it's nice to have the lighting and the opportunity to play late. And I know games go late. I've attended any number of my grandson's games, and invariably they don't end when they're supposed to end, it seems. So my position is in opposition because of the impact upon the neighborhood, and I'm a little. I guess it goes back to '06 when initially the fields were put in. It's only, now we're in 12 years ago, and things do change. I understand that, but there were some assurances made, and apparently, although I haven't seen it, it was just entered in her comments in a letter as little as 5 years ago as well. No, I don't need to. And I think that we should, as public entities, and maybe down the road, maybe we'll have to consider this again. But I don't think this is the time, and I think that again it is too great of an impact on the neighborhood, and ought not to be approved.
All right, council, any other?
The letter, Steve might want to see that as well.
Council, any other questions?
Oh, I thought you were approaching to say something. Not a question, but I guess if we're at the point in the conversation where we're talking about how we arrive at our decisions and so on, I agree with both the mayor and Steve on various different points about the need to keep it updated. I've got children who participate in the sports that we're referring to and will continue to do so. But the part I can't get past is the fact that the building, or excuse me, the facility itself was kind of built on the premise that it would not be lit and that it would not, even a daytime practice competition facility does not include lighting. I understand that's directly with relation to the plan in 2012, but that's the impression that was given to the folks. I know things do change. Some things haven't changed. Bob's lived there since, I don't even want to guess, but a long time or whatever. And he was under the impression, as well as others that spoke, Mary and others in the crowd, that that was the premise of the facility. That's the part I have trouble getting past. So I would be in opposition of this at this time. Without making a motion, I just want to let you know where we're at. And I don't know, Nancy, if you had any. I know you're on the fence a little bit yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Randy. Go ahead.
Hearing your pros and cons in your conversation that you have, and I would respectfully submit to you an amendment to our proposal this morning, if you would consider. If you would vote in favor of us just adding the lights to the soccer field only, based on the fact that we do play games there already, and we have been allowed to play games there from the inception. If you would allow us to play our games past the nighttime hours on the soccer complex and not add the lighting to the baseball complexes based on our current use permit, our conditional use permit, that we're not allowed to play games there. And the perception is that we built the facility with that in mind. But obviously the facility was built in mind for us to play soccer games there, and we currently do, both us, the city, and the Club Missouri. If you would consider allowing us to add lighting to the soccer complex, that lighting to the soccer complex has no negative impact to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
The lights are well below .03 as far as the spillage, if you use that term. There is no negative impact. There is no negative impact for baseball games to the neighbors directly to the north there as well. At that point in time, the impact is all positive in my viewpoint if we're able to add lighting to the soccer complex and be able to play full games at the soccer complex past the nighttime hours as well, if you would consider that as a recommendation.
From a procedural standpoint, would that have to go back through planning or anybody again, or?
No, you can amend. So the Planning Commission had the recommendations, and you can amend those. You just can't, I mean, the way I would look at it is they asked for this and you're amending it down to this, and that would be okay. If you changed it to say, well, we're going to have 85 lights, that would be something different. But I would see this as an amendment.
And what level of vote on the council's part does it take for an amendment? Just a simple majority?
Simple majority.
I believe so. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Versus an override or a
to deny it, you'd have to have 4/5.
A supermajority of 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you mind bringing up the map one more time
Sure.
with the lighting so I can look respect to just the soccer field as well? Just want to see it.
I'm going to give you the zoomed in version. So you can see the spillage, if you will, on this side. Doesn't even go off of the property.
And the right wouldn't extend much past the baseball field either.
No, no. And the two properties that are most impacted are these two here that are right up against, and they wouldn't be impacted at all because, well, there would be lights, but they wouldn't have that spillage.
So lights wouldn't affect that area. If the ball diamonds weren't lit, then there wouldn't be night play, which wouldn't necessarily affect that area.
Okay.
If I'm hearing it right.
Would you still be requesting regulation play though, just not at night on the baseball field? Just not at night?
Just not at night.
Okay.
Here's the lighting diagram.
Okay, with the, yeah, the inner circles there, okay.
Pass that down when you finish, would you, Dave?
Absolutely. Okay, that's kind of what I suspected. Let's see it. Thank you.
So you're suggesting, Randy, to be allowed or for us to consider conducting regulation baseball games
Unlit.
At
Correct.
unlit
And
fields?
the only reason we suggest that is not necessarily for our purposes that much, to be honest with you, is for the Hutchinson Recreation Commission. If we're allowed to play games out there, for example, on a Saturday and or a Sunday afternoon for their tournaments, that allows them 2 more fields in our community that they can play at. Right now, they have a difficult time in attracting and visiting with them the number of teams that they'd like to host because they just don't have the facilities.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, if it's more for them than it would be for us, because we're going to play our games in the evenings, and we're going to continue to play at Rice Park. Because if we go to try to play here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we won't get 5 innings in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Council, before you go any further, Janet, could you make it clear for all of us, if this is the proposal, what specific amendments need to be made to the current conditional use permit for that proposal?
So the regulation baseball play.
Is there a limitation on that currently for baseball games
Yes.
with the conditional use permit?
Well, as part of the record, they've only been allowed to play a couple of games.
Okay.
We could not find anything that was
All right.
specifically
Okay.
spelled out, so.
I understand. I've seen some of those old records. I know what you're talking about there.
And then to be allowed to have 4 lights on the soccer field only.
As opposed to the
As opposed to
the
9.
13 new light fixtures.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those fixtures are only 70 foot.
Okay, for the soccer field, they're only
That
70?
doesn't include the 90, okay, gotcha.
Okay. So in other words,
The
number
4 at 70
1 on the
feet.
condition would have to be rewritten.
Okay,
So-
so, right.
I'd be interested in hearing some response from the folks, the neighbors who spoke, to
The secondary proposal.
the amended
the
proposal.
proposed
or,
amendment?
Yeah,
Mhm.
the allowance of regulation baseball during the daytime, unlit, and the having 4 poles around the soccer field as the only additional, as the only lighting. If you wish to, you don't have to.
Right. Twist their arm.
Yeah. Bob, any thoughts, or Mary?
I had never really thought about it until you brought it up, but that might be something that would be workable more than what we have right now, just simply because the lights are out away from everybody.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're trying to be bad neighbors or anything, it's just that we like to have a little privacy.
Sure.
And by moving maybe just to the soccer field, you would open up, that would leave the rest of it open, and people could still do stuff in the evening, and it's still going to cause some traffic problems, but it's not going to be as bad as if you had everything going. The other thing that, and I know this kind of gets a little bit testing once in a while, but we talked about, well, we got 5 games scheduled. Let's be realistic about it. Once it starts, that 5 games is going to go 10, then 15, then 20. That's just the way it is.
Sure.
That's what you want. So we throw these numbers out here sometimes, but we're not being really realistic about it. You know, but I can understand.
Just asking for lights at the baseball complex. Or perhaps if that's your intent, perhaps you need to start thinking about the neighbors a little bit and trying to build some bridges and understand how that's going to affect the neighborhood, and think about planting trees and let them grow before you ask for the lights. So I think it's a good compromise, one that the neighbors could live with, and we're for sports.
All right. Great. Very good, Mary.
Thank you for your comment. Man, I love compromise.
Yeah,
Randy, I want to thank you for offering that.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
And I concur.
Yeah.
Well,
And
would
so do
somebody like to make a stab at the motion? Or Mary, you read it very eloquently there.
Would you mind? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can share.
Would somebody like to offer that in the form of an amended motion?
Steve's got this.
I'd move that I think the words to use are amend and approve, the amendment being that there would be permitted 4 lights around the soccer field only, and that regulation baseball would also be allowed.
Unlit, I think the word is.
Remaining, yeah, the
unlit
baseball
fields.
fields remaining unlit. And I guess then it goes on to, and then approving the recommendation of Planning Commission as amended. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a conditional use permit, et cetera, there on East 23rd.
I will second that
All
motion.
right, we have a motion and a second. Janet, is that clear enough?
You can put it, Linda can put it together.
Okay, all right. All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's call roll. Linda?
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you all for your
Thank you for your-
attendance this morning and your input to coming up with a workable solution and a compromise. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, can we have a
Yes, I think
10-minute
that's the next
recess?
thing in order. We'll take a,
Thank you, sir.
we'll take a 10-minute break.
That turned out well.
Yeah, well, you know.
Linda. Linda, for the next item?
Item 7C, consider Hutchinson Airport Engineering Consultant Selection.
Good morning. Peter Miller, Hutchinson Airport Manager, and I promise this will go much quicker than the last discussion that you guys had. It looks like I'm pretty much talking in front of staff.
You cleared the room.
Yeah, you
Cleared the
are.
room. So I'm up here today to talk real quick about our airport consultant selection. So some background here. Because of the complexity, cost, and length of time that a lot of these airport projects take, the FAA allows us to select or choose a specific airport consultant that will help us do all the engineering, the grant writing, pretty much all the background stuff that has to take place, the construction safety management plans and matrix plans, all those types of stuff we have to do. They allow us to choose one engineering firm to use for 5 years at a time. When we choose that firm, we're very specific about what projects we intend to do within that 5 years. So 2017 represented the last project for the last time we did a consultant selection back in 2012. We chose H.W. Lochner, who's actually been our chosen airport consultant since I think about the mid-1990s. They have helped us with numerous projects since then, including Taxiway Bravo realignment in 2000, 4th Avenue realignment in 2010, a couple mill and overlay projects, and they were also our design consultant for the most recently finished 1735 reconstruction project. So we've had a history with Lochner for quite a few years. So the first week of November, we issued out a request for qualifications that goes through all of our public channels. It kind of goes out sort of like a bid, like we do. And generally, most of the engineering consultant firms know when we're going to do this, because this is how these companies get by. Every airport does this that is eligible for federal grants. So it was time for us to do it. And so when the request for qualifications ended up on the website, it took about 30 seconds for me to start being visited by consultants from far and wide. But ultimately, there were 4 firms that responded with a statement of qualifications for the request for qualifications. 3 of those firms met with me individually. They'll come in, they schedule times throughout the month that we had the request out there. They wanted to come and kind of take pictures, talk with me about what projects we've kind of got in the queue, basically just kind of get a feel for what's going on at the airport and what their role could potentially be in that. There were a total of about 7 firms that contacted me, but only 3 of the 4 that submitted actually met and came in and talked. Those other 3 actually never submitted. They just kind of got some information. Because of the list of projects that we had for the next 5 years and the amount of time and cost that it takes to put together a submittal, several firms kind of looked at that and said, you know what, we're not going to worry about it this time. We'll contact you here in 2022 when your next projects come up. So 4 different firms submitted for us, and we formed a consultant selection committee. That committee was made up of Mayor John Daveline, Parks and Facilities Director Justin Combs, Engineering Director Bruce Colley, Zach Klobes from the Airport Advisory Committee, and Brian Palmer, who is the Airport Director at the Newton City County Airport. Once we got all the submittals, I gave everybody copies of their submittals, and the selection committee then ranked those firms on, I believe there are about 8 different aspects of their submittal. Some of the bigger ones were the thoroughness of the submittal, similar project experience, have these firms done some of these other projects before? And an important one was also the relationships those firms had with both the FAA and KDOT Aviation. I like to think we've got a pretty good relationship with those folks, and it's important that our consultants have that too. So, and of course, the other portion was the qualifications of their staff to actually help us complete the projects and kind of know how that stuff works. There were a few other things too, but the selection committee then ranked those different aspects on a 1 through 5 ranking. We had to assign numbers to it, and then they submitted all that information to me along with comments and questions, and I just compiled all those, and basically the firm with the highest number was the one that we then looked a little bit harder at to see if that's who we wanted to choose. I did answer questions. Bruce and Justin and Brian Palmer and Zach, they all gave me some pretty good questions, wanting to know about how we had worked with Lochner in the past, you know, what projects some of the other firms had worked on, kind of what my personal opinion was and stuff. I pretty much facilitated the selection. I didn't actually fill out any numbers for the selection. So ultimately what it came down to, and this is in order of the numerical ranking, H.W. Lochner ended up with 180 points. Garver Engineering ended up with 170. KLM ended up with 153. And GBA out of Kansas City ended up with 109.5. Somebody threw a .5 in there. But so Lochner was clearly the leader by more than 10 points. And so that we had a short discussion and realized that because they were so far ahead of the second place, there was really no reason for us to bring together, offer interviews of these different firms. So we decided just that Lochner was probably going to be the best fit for Hutchinson, as they have been in the past, and been very pleased with the work that they've done. It should be noted too that something that made Lochner stand out from some of the other submittals was that Lochner has partnered with BG Consultants here in town to provide some of the more kind of feet on the ground surveying, project inspection, stuff like that. That was something that a lot of the other firms, well, actually none of the other firms offered too. They did a lot of that stuff in-house. So I think that went kind of a long way with the selection committee. Keeps it a little more local. We've got working relationships with the folks over at BG Consultants. So that being said, this was basically just to inform City Council that we intend, or if it's okay, to continue with H.W. Lochner for another 5 years and start working on our next series of projects. So.
Intend, yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Who are we to judge?
Peter, I'm going to offer an editorial comment.
Okay.
That I hope in balance over the next 5 years that Hochner Group will continue to, and you will continue to pursue certainly the priorities of the airport itself and the taxiways and so on and the runways, but also non-related airport development projects, T-hangars, industrial properties, all of those other things. I hope that you will consider and continue to keep that incorporated into the planning process.
Absolutely. Those are pretty high on my list, actually.
Oh, yeah. And there's something to be said for institutional memory. Are you ready for a motion?
Sure.
Okay. That said, I will move to approve retaining H.W. Lochner as the officially selected airport engineering consultant for the Hutchinson Airport for the next 5 years.
Second.
All right, motion is second. Any further discussion?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Curiosity. What were the maximum number of points that could have been awarded in the process that you utilized?
210.
Okay. Not pertinent to my decisions, just
Right.
interesting.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Just curious.
Yep. Sure.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please call roll, Linda.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes. All right, next item.
Item 7D, consider golf course improvements bid results.
Good morning, Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. This item is for the construction of holes 2, 3, and 4. Not really construction, I guess, remodel, renovation, I guess is the word I'm looking for. If you remember, several weeks ago, Tyler Zimmerman, the landscape architect, made a presentation about what the renovations would look like, the holes 2, 3, and 4. If you recall it, it's a new green on hole 3, new green on hole 4, some tee box work, as well as also actually a new tee for hole 6 because of its location to green number 3. So anyways, so this is the bid results for those. You can see we had 3 that responded. The low bid is Hauska. The total bid amount that you see there, the 272, is actually just the base bid. Does not include the alternate. Base bid primarily is irrigation work, construction of the greens, as well as, especially on hole 2, the fairway is going to kind of change locations. It comes before more of a dog leg. That number does not include any sod work. We will be doing that in-house. So the alternate item then is the construction of the tee boxes or any of the remodeling of the tee boxes. The reason we had that separate was in case bids were higher than we expected. We can do that work in-house, so we carved that out as a second alternate, or as an alternate. Matt's estimate for this project was about $350,000, so we are well under, even with the alternate, what we expected. Hauska is considerably lower than the other two bidders.
Yeah.
We do have history with Hauska. We don't have any concerns with proceeding with them. They did the last phase, and they performed well. So even though they are so low, we think maybe they're just hungry or something. So they're familiar with working here. So we did earlier this year bond $496,000 for this phase. So the balance of that then, so the difference between what this bid tab shows and that 496, a lot of that is the actual purchase of the sod itself. We purchased that directly, so there's no markup. And then we'll also install the sod for the greens ourselves with in-house labor. We do not install the sod for the fairways. The intent is that if this is approved today, that Hauska could start hopefully within the next few weeks, or next week or two actually. And then if everything works out with weather, we'd be sodding in early April, and then the course would be back open, or those holes would be back open in late April, which would get us kind of to our big tournaments that start in May. So again, that's all weather dependent.
That's right.
Best case scenario, that would happen. If not, we'll set up temporary greens, which actually we already have set up temporary greens. And then we understand this creates some disruption to players when we're renovating, especially 3 holes. So we'll do our best to accommodate the players. One thing we've done in the past, if players want to skip those 3 holes, then we'll allow them to play like 9, 10, or 10, 11, and 12 again, because they're all 3 kind of looped together. So we do our best. We do our best to accommodate, because we understand, that regular play is being disrupted. So I do want to point out that in the memo, there's just a minor typo about the total dollar amount. So if you add for Hauska, if you add the $272,503.20 plus the $11,255, that total is $283,758.20. So in the memo it says $53 or $52. Yeah. So just, but the correct total is the one I just read. So. With that, we do recommend proceeding with Hauska with both the base bid and the alternate item.
Justin, aside from this item here, phase 4, are there future phases in the plans, or can you recall?
Yeah, I can have Matt Miller speak to those. But yes, we do have further phases.
We have further phases.
Yeah.
Okay.
A reason why we're doing holes 2, 3, and 4 right now. Is actually a little bit ahead of schedules. We're trying to get the irrigation and trying to get improvements towards the pond, or the swamp, or whatever you want to call it. So we can create that into more of a pond.
Okay.
So until we can get irrigation and improve that area, is when it makes sense to do that. So that would be the next phase addresses that hole. So
that's fine.
As a southpaw, though, if you want to leave the pond empty, I get a lot more of my balls back out of there when it's dry. I kid. You did hit home on one of the things, and I'm glad you did. Anytime I see such a discrepancy between the two in a low bid situation, you want to make sure you're not getting low quality. And you said you've worked with Hauska before. They do good work. They just priced more appropriately for
what
us.
sets them apart is they're a little bit smaller company.
They're a little more nimble.
So I think they have probably less overhead than the other two.
Makes sense. Very fine.
The visualization of swamp versus pond, though.
Yeah. You can take that to the bank, that pond versus swamp.
Yeah. Oh, is that right? Okay.
Depends on the water level.
Yeah,
depends on the water level.
There's approximately a $65,000 savings, so to speak, from the estimate, if my math is close to correct, and the actual bid. So will the additional expenses for sod and the work that will be done in-house in purchasing materials stay within the original estimate? In other words, will we at the end of this still look at having 65, give or take a bit, $1,000 savings of the whole project?
Yeah, that's something that Matt Miller and I discussed this morning. If there's a balance at the end of this, so if we do bid out all the sod and there is a little bit of balance, we'll just use that towards the next phase.
Yeah, just hold it over.
To the next phase.
Budget
And
into
remind
the
me,
following.
Justin, what's the funding source, line item, et cetera?
It's all through bonding.
Okay. So it's general operation budget, bonded?
Yeah,
Okay.
general obligation bonds, yeah.
Very good.
All right, council, any other questions? All right, entertain a motion here.
I move we approve awarding of the bid to Huska for Cary Park Golf Course renovation Phase 4 for a total not to exceed $283,758.2 for primary construction as well as the alternate tee box construction.
All right, motion and a second.
Second.
And second, excuse me, Dave.
You're good.
Let's call roll. Linda?
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent,
Yes?
Dave Line.
Yes. And next item.
Item 7E, consider 2017 annual report for the Hutchinson Land Bank.
Good morning again, Janet McCarron, Director of Planning and Development. And every year, we come to you with our annual land bank report. Well, every year since 2014, which is when the land bank was instituted. And I have a very short presentation. Good, I'll try and pull it up here. Sorry.
Maybe? Maybe not?
Oh, yep, here it comes.
There it is. Okay.
And there it went. Oh, there it is.
Per state statute, the governing body has to approve the annual report, which includes a proposed budget for the following year. And we have to publish the report. We don't put the whole report in the paper, but we do put the proposed budget for the following year in the newspaper. And I think that's probably because the state wants, land banks to be more public and transparent type of process. The copy of the land bank annual report is in your packet, with just some quick summaries. In 2017, we acquired 2 new properties, 712 South Maple and 15 West 18th Avenue. Those were both acquired on at the tax sale. And then 3 properties were rehabilitated. East 8th Avenue, there will be a house built on that one. That'll be our first one with an actual house, so we're pretty excited. North Plum Street, that was purchased to put a neighborhood garden on. And then West Avenue A is another one that will, Interfaith Housing was going to be moving a house to that one. And I think you can see the foundation for that. On December 4th, the Land Bank Board of Trustees approved the proposed annual report with a vote of 4-0, and we do recommend approval. And here's the motion. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Janice, since you mentioned the fiscal part going into the paper, I just want to comment. I think the land bank is fiscally prudent. I don't think it's a matter of being extravagant in any way. And only a few years old at the same time. I think maybe they are tightening themselves tighter than they have to at some points. But anyway, it's certainly not an extravagance on their part at all.
Their biggest expense has been mowing charges.
Mowing. Yeah.
So they try not to hold too many properties at one time because, over the course of a summer, that can be pretty expensive.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, if you're ready for a
Sure,
motion.
we're ready for a motion.
I move we approve the annual report from the Land Bank for 2017.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call roll.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent,
Yes?
Dave Line.
Yes. All right, next item.
Item 7F, consider approval of agreement with the Kansas Department of Transportation for the Washington Street Bicycle Boulevard.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Bruce Colley, Director of Engineering.
Morning, Bruce.
we've been talking about the Washington Street Bicycle Boulevard here in the past several meetings, and this is a very important item here. Attached in your packet is the agreement between the Secretary of the Kansas Department of Transportation and the City of Hutchinson necessary for funding this project. And we've selected the consultant prior to this, and but this is the actual funding amount. And from a fiscal standpoint, the agreement, as stated in the attachment, is 80% KDOT and FHWA and 20% city. The 20% cost to the City of Hutchinson is $90,728.76, and is budgeted in the 2000 CIP Washington Avenue Bicycle Boulevard. Our recommendation, staff's recommendation, is for council to approve the mayor to sign the agreement with the Kansas Department of Transportation for funding of the project up to $453,644 and no cents. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
This has been thoroughly discussed.
Yes.
I think we're ready to.
3 meetings in a row.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Do you have any questions of Mr. Cawley?
No.
Do we have a motion?
I would be more than pleased to move to approve the agreement with the Kansas Department of Transportation for funding of the Washington Street Bicycle Boulevard project up to $453,644 and authorize the mayor to sign.
All right, motion.
Second.
Second. Please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes. All right, next item.
Item 7G, consider purchase of computer-aided dispatch upgrade.
Morning, Council. I believe you have a memo from me in your packets concerning this, and basically what it is we're asking your permission to proceed with this upgrade this year using 911 funds and no general fund money, so that by the time 2019 rolls around, we'll have all of the preliminary work, which is going to take 6 to 7 months of building all the tables and basically rebuilding all of the computer-aided dispatch functions that are in the system that we're currently using, ready to go when January of 2019 rolls around. We've been holding off on this upgrade for a couple of years for a couple of different reasons. The fire department intends to ask to get onto the computer-aided dispatch operation in 2019. They have not been on it to this point, so it makes sense for us to go ahead and with our upgrade at this point. And we're asking that we be allowed to do it in 2018 using 911 funds, and again, no general fund money until 2019. But I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. I realize that it's a pretty simplified explanation of what's going on, but any questions you might have, I'll try to answer.
I had one with regards to I'm trying to find the sentence. This CAD upgrade is not solely for handling 911 calls, therefore the split would apply. What else is it used for?
Well, everything, all of our records management begins with the 911 call.
Gotcha.
So all the information that is associated with that call, any other information that dispatchers find in our system that might be associated with individuals in that call, can be relayed to the officers in the field through their mobile devices.
Okay.
So that doesn't.
That's beyond the call
beyond
itself.
just delivering the 911 call to the emergency service.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
The same will be true if the fire department comes on. There'll be a lot of information that the dispatchers will be able to communicate to the fire apparatus, the firefighters en route to a fire, or if they need additional information when they get there, this will facilitate that through the use of, again, mobile data terminals.
Gotcha.
So, and then all of our other records information on everything we do is initiated from that 911 call, and the dispatchers put in a tremendous amount of information that has nothing to do with delivering the call
itself,
the basic call of what's going on, why you
everything originates with the phone call.
Right, everything originates with that phone call.
Yeah, that makes sense now.
getting the phone call to the service is covered. The additional stuff is not covered with the 911.
They're that
Yeah,
specific,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense, okay.
Well, this is huge, isn't it? I mean, as far as the integration with, fire
It would be,
department?
in my view, it's a
Yeah.
very big deal that
Right.
the fire department is interested in coming on. And what it does, what it's doing for us is, doing to us is that we're moving, and I don't have all the proper technological terminology, but we're moving to an IP-based, fully IP-based CAD system as opposed to what we're using today, and which means I can't even tell you. I don't know what all it means. I will tell you this, that through, when we began negotiating the contract for just the CAD and associated it with the potential of fire coming on, that we also began negotiating our annual maintenance costs, and we have gotten a substantial decrease in our annual maintenance costs.
Because of?
Because
Looking
of
at
doing
the-
all this at one time.
Oh, wow, that's
Okay.
good.
Okay.
I take it, you answered the one question I had, I think already, Chief. I was wondering where was the money coming from for the 30% match if it's not in our 18 budget, but there's not any general fund used this year. It'll be
Right.
next
We're asking
year.
for in 2019.
Yeah.
asking-
And so
We have the money in our
911.
2019 MRF account.
Right.
In the Murphy.
It's
In MRF.
In the
accounted
budget.
for that purpose.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And-
Well, no, it
and-
makes,
And we will have a letter of agreement, if you will, with the county, with Mr. Meager. We talked about that basically sets this out. I think they're briefing the county commission today, but it'll have some language in there that speaks to the cash basis law, because we essentially can't
You can't
commit to something in
Yeah.
19.
Next
So,
Yeah.
Gotcha.
you know, there's that, the county's well aware of that language would be in there, and we do not anticipate, I would hope that if that's an issue, we probably ought to talk about that today, but, so just for clarity, that there is a formal agreement, because the county will be the agency that actually is contracting, with Tyler to
do that.
buy the software,
And
right?
I just got word that the county approved
They did,
approved
okay.
it this morning.
Okay.
well, that does kind of beg the question. What will our 30%, maybe it's in here and I missed it. I don't think so. What
Yeah.
will our 30% probably amount to?
Around 42,000.
About
42.
42,000.
Is it in there and I missed it?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, I
Last
see it.
sentence.
Thank you.
The total CAD upgrade is about 142.
Okay,
30% for the police department is roughly $42,000.
got it.
Okay, Chief. Council, any other questions?
Nope.
Do we have a motion?
I will move to approve the upgrade to the computer-aided dispatch CAD system and authorize the mayor to sign any required documents.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes?
Dayline?
Yes. All right, we're down to reports of city officials, aren't we, Linda?
We are.
Nancy, anything?
Nothing today.
Okay, Steve?
Nothing, thank you.
Nothing, Dave?
Cow Creek is ready to be ice skated on.
Yeah.
And don't do that, actually.
No, I was gonna say.
That'll go back to our 911
Yeah.
situation again. But no, and Happy New Year
Happy New
to
Year.
everyone out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have anything this morning either. Mr. Deerdoff?
Just one thing, wanted to, and I mentioned in a previous weekly report, maybe scheduling a study session with the city council in January, since we have 5 Tuesdays there, and basically to review the comprehensive plan, provide you with an update, taking a look at the goals, the strategies that were there, and the status of those. And I think it's important that we spend the time, just go through each one of those and kind of see where we're at. And that might begin to give us some direction as we move forward in our budgeting processes as we go forward. So I was looking at January the 30th.
30th, you say?
When's our?
Is that the fifth Tuesday then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to ask Linda, when is our employee recognition? That's not that day, is it?
It is the 30th.
Ah, well, see, that's in the afternoon. That's all right.
No, it's at noon.
It's at noon.
It's at noon. We won't have you till noon, so.
No lunch again.
So, yeah,
No,
30th.
Well, no, you get lunch out there.
If we pour water and tea, we get Linda's
That's right.
Wonderful lunch.
I mean, the 23rd
Dessert
is,
too.
I work hard on
Yes,
it.
you do.
Yeah.
So
the
January
23rd's an option too, if you want to look at that,
You say the 23rd?
or the 30th.
If you really think the morning's going to
Does that crowd
provide
the
enough time.
30th too much? Would you prefer it on another day?
Oh, no, no, I'll be ready, yeah,
You'll be
because
ready.
I figure we're gonna start at, what, 8:30 and probably be done by 10:30.
8:30 is good. Better than 8.
January 30th?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Okay, but that's also the employee recognition.
Look at your 23rd and see if that, everybody.
23rd work
it
for
might
me
be
if we
better for
prefer to
all
go
of us.
there.
Either one.
Pardon?
Either one.
Okay.
What is it?
Jan, will we have all the comments by then? Yeah.
23rd?
Yeah, that might help,
Okay.
because it might, that morning's pretty busy as we're getting ready for
Yeah.
that, so.
Right.
23rd it is, 8:30.
20:30, 8:30.
8:30. Okay.
At
And-
8:30.
Yeah, and that's
Yes,
all.
John, 8:30.
8:30.
7:30.
Middle of the day, Nancy.
Not my day.
All right.
That's all I had, Mayor.
Is that all you have?
Yes.
All right, I believe we are scheduled to go into an executive session, so would somebody like to make a motion to recess?
How much time?
12:30.
12:30?
Sorry, and we're gonna bring something in to get you through that, but we've got quite a bit to talk about,
Okay.
so.
Okay.
I move we recess into executive session pursuant to the employer-employee negotiations exemption, KSA 75-4319B3, in order to discuss issues related to the 2019 contract negotiations with the city's bargaining units. The open meeting to resume in the city council chamber at 12:30 p.m.
Okay, motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes?
Dave Line?
Yes.